Good morning, and this morning I want to take a little bit of a departure down memory lane and talk about the original Xbox and why I think the original Xbox was and still is one of the best consoles ever made. Before we get into that though, I just have to give you a little bit of history and, talk about why I ended up with the original Xbox and why I think it's such a good console. My history is that I wasn't really a console gamer. I was more of a PC gamer, and I actually, I was a bit of a PC gamer snob back in the day. Yeah, I'd played on, different consoles, and I used to go around mates' houses and play on consoles, the Mega Drive specifically, and the original PlayStation. And I think my first experiences of consoles were, back with the Atari. And even before that, I seem to remember playing something called the Grandstand, which was basically a Pong machine around someone's house. But I was never really a console gamer. The first sort of gaming machine I owned was a Commodore 64. And I also used to go around a mate's house and play on the Spectrum and the ZX81. And so, I had the Commodore 64 and loved it, but I never really took much notice of the NES. And you'll probably find that a lot of people in the UK didn't sell that well in the UK because the Commodore had already established itself in the market. So I moved on from the Commodore 64 onto PCs really and never looked back. But then when the original Xbox came out, a mate of mine, the guy I used to go around and play on the Mega Drive and the PlayStation, he got the original Xbox. And I went round his house and he sat me down with Halo. And I was into shooters back then, and I was thinking, shooter on a console. Yeah, right. Because shooters on consoles back then were rubbish, let's be honest. If you've ever tried to play GoldenEye, the control mechanism is awful. And it was the other way around for sports games, and that's probably why I used to go around my mate's house and play sports games a lot of the time after the pub and all the rest of it. But he sat me down with the Xbox and Halo, and I picked up the controller, that massive great Duke controller, which was fine for my hands because I got big hands. And I played it, I don't know how long we played it for, probably quite a while. But within the first half hour, I'd sussed out how to play it because it had those dual analog sticks. You had the left one for forward, back, left and right. And then you had the right one for look. And you could look up and down and around and all the rest of it. So it kind of emulated what you would do with the keyboard and mouse. And obviously, we all know it's not as accurate as a keyboard and mouse. And that's why we have auto aim on a lot of these games these days. But it was usable. And it was a revelation for me because I was looking at it and I was thinking, God, this actually works. And having tried to play games on consoles before, shooters on consoles before, it was unbelievable because I'd tried to play GoldenEye and I'd tried to play some of the ports of things like, Doom and Quake and stuff. And frankly, without the dual analog sticks, they just didn't work properly. If you ever go back and try and play some of those ports of PC shooters that were released for consoles, well, frankly, as a PC gamer, I used to laugh at people trying to play those things because it was a pain. It was a nightmare trying to play them. So I sat down with the Xbox and I played it and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so it changed my view on what consoles could do in terms of shooters. And, if you look forward to now, that's the control mechanism that virtually every game uses. Every shooter, that is, first person and third person shooter. So that was amazing. But also, the fact was that the Xbox, Microsoft obviously intended to hit the ground running, and they made a beast of a console. Now, the original Xbox didn't sell that well, but it was powerful, and it did do some things that other consoles didn't. It had a very powerful CPU in there for the time. It had a custom 733 megahertz Intel Pentium 3 Coppermine based processor. It had 64 meg of DDR SD RAM running at 200 megahertz. And it had a hard drive, 8 or 10 gig of an internal hard drive. And that meant that you didn't have to mess around with memory cards. You could still use memory cards and they would plug into the controller, but you didn't have to use them. You could save your games to the hard drive. What's more, you could also rip CDs to the hard drive and play music, or at least you could, put your music in there, MP3s and whatnot. I forget how it worked now, but you could play music on the thing. And so that was amazing as well. And then on top of that, you had the power, you had the controls, you had the hard drive, which changed a lot of things, and then you had Xbox Live. Now, we had online gaming with the Sega Dreamcast, and it had a modem. But it, let's be honest, it didn't work very well. Gaming online with a console back then was not great. And, it was even in its infancy, really, with PC gaming. So when they tried to do it with the Dreamcast, it was pretty good that they tried, but it wasn't going to work very well. Then the Xbox came along, and you had an Ethernet, and you could plug it into your router, and it worked properly. And we had Xbox Live, which they set up from the beginning to work really well. Now, it didn't launch with the console, it came later. And I was talking to Grant about this on one of the Chit Chat episodes that I did with him. And he played it a lot, and he was very impressed with it. And a lot of people were. And, nobody was up with Microsoft on this at the time. It was groundbreaking. So we had power, we had controls, we had the hard drive, and we had Xbox Live. And then along came the modding scene. And that hard drive really made it easy for the modding scene, along with the fact that it was basically an x86 architecture. So the architecture and the fact it had a hard drive meant that the modding scene could do all sorts of things. And we got XBMC, or Xbox Media Center, which a lot of you guys will now know as Kodi. That came along, and that meant that you could put movies onto the hard drive and you could play movies on there. And we also got people ported across MAME, and so it became a monster. And the story goes that one of the people who worked on the development of the original Xbox actually got hold of a modded Xbox and took it into Microsoft and showed some of the top people, including, I believe, Bill Gates. And they looked at this thing, and it was behind closed doors. I don't know what was said. But if you look at what was available with XBMC and the ability to play movies and the ability to have your games on the hard drive, because you could once it was modded, you could put your disc into the drive and you could rip it to the hard drive, and then you could play the game off the hard drive. They looked at this, and some of this eventually came out on the 360. Now, obviously, the ability to put your discs in and rip them to the hard drive, that never happened. And, there's good reasons why that never happened, because obviously they wanted to avoid piracy. But, with having the hard drive and later on being able to download games to the hard drive, some of this stuff, you can suspect at least, came from the modding community. The ability to have discs on your hard drive or games on your hard drive and play from there. The ability to have media on your hard drive and play from there. All these things came from the modding community, and the things that you could do with the Xbox back then were amazing. It was a fantastic bit of kit. And that brings me up to now. I modded my original Xbox once I got it, and I didn't get it straight away. As I say, I went round a mate's house and he had it, and I think it was 6 to 9 months later that I finally got my Xbox. And it wasn't long after that I modded it. And I actually modded it with an executor chip, and I put an executor 2, I believe it was, in there. And then I put a bigger hard drive in there. I think I put a 500 gig hard drive in there. And then it opened things up massively. I used to rip my discs onto the hard drive. I put MAME on there and played arcade games. And it was fantastic. And then, things moved on. I got the 360 and I got rid of my original Xbox, which I always regretted after that. And then I even got rid of my games. And I've been buying them all back recently. Recently, the last 18 months or so, I've been buying them all back. And I've got well in excess of 100 games now again. It's a shame because all mine were mint condition, and some of the ones I bought aren't as good condition. But hey, it is what it is. But so now I actually still have an Xbox, but it's not my original Xbox. I gave that away to my partner's uncle, as I say, and the Xbox I have now is actually a mate of mine's Xbox, and I've made a video with my mate talking about the Commodore 64, and I actually gave him my Commodore 64, and this video should be out in the next few weeks when I can knock it into shape, because it's it was a long talk that we had about the Commodore 64 and the things that he worked on with the hardware and stuff, the changes that they made, the modding scene on the Commodore 64. So I gave him my Commodore 64 some years ago, and he repaid, I should say, the favour by giving me his original Xbox, and that was modded with an Executor 3 chip, and I think that had a 500 gig hard drive in there as well. And when I got it, it was all over the place because he hadn't used it for years. It'd been sat in the attic, and so it had this drive in there, and I tried to turn it on and get it running, and I could get it to boot, but I couldn't get it into the BIOS. I couldn't get the dashboard running or anything, because with the Executor 3 chip there's dip switches and you could load up multiple BIOSes, and I couldn't work out which BIOS was a functioning BIOS and which ones weren't, and I ended up finding and downloading new BIOSes and getting it all up and running. It took me several months, working off and on. And I finally got that up and running, and then I decided I was going to put a bigger hard drive in. So I got hold of an IDE to SATA adapter, and I got a 2 terabyte hard drive, and I bunged that in there as well. And that's what we're looking at here. And that means, with all the modding that went on, and unfortunately I'd lost all my original, I got rid of all my original files that I'd kept for the original Xbox, and all my documentation as well that I'd kept. Things that I'd written down when I did the modding. And you used to have to solder in a board. That's how the Executor worked. So I got all that done, and then I put this hard drive in, and then I had to frig around with working out how to do all that again. And obviously with a 2 terabyte hard drive, things had changed as well. And I'm not going to go into that here. There's plenty of videos showing you how to do that stuff. I'm just talking about, what you can do with it and how great it is, and why, it's still great today. So I got this hard drive. It's all in there, and then I start porting across my games, because I've got a lot of my games are saved, and so I've ported across. I've FTP'd into the hard drive, and I've put on all the applications and the games, and I also got hold of some emulation stuff, and we'll get into that in a minute. But with this 2 terabyte hard drive, it means I've got, if we look in here, I've got games, then I've got games A to Z, and I've edited this so that it's set up how I want it. So we've got this menu here, and if you go through, it's got images, and I think I've added some of these images in myself. I don't know, I can't remember now. Various options, but you can put in all sorts in here. But you've got File Explorer. You can go in and have a look what's in the drive. Not a lot to see really, but let's go into System and Settings. If you look on here, we got auto date and time, live update, blah blah blah, storage, system. Now, video display. If you had an original Xbox in the UK, you were limited as to what output it would do, and I think it was 480p. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but it went up to 480p. But in the US, you could get a different cable for it, and then you could output to up to 1080i. So if you want to output at the higher resolutions, you need to change it to an NTSC output, and that's what I've done here. I've outputted it to NTSC, and now if you look, I've got the options to output to 480p, 720p, and 1080i. And if you think about it, a console from back then that could output at 1080i is unbelievable. This thing was a monster. It was an absolute beast. It was a bit annoying that you couldn't do much with it in the UK until it was modded. But hey, you'd want to mod it anyway. So I've got it set to output at 1080i or up to 1080i, and some games will actually do that. Not all games, but some will do that. And there's various different front ends. I used Evolution X, I think, back in the day, and you can also use XBMC. Which, as I say, XBMC you guys may well know as Kodi. You can get Kodi on virtually everything now, but Kodi originally came out as XBMC on the original Xbox, and it made it into a multimedia machine as well, as I've already said. But yeah, so if you go in, if you look here, I've got games A to Z, because I've set it up. I've got all my games in this one, and I've got games A to Z, so it's easier to look through games in here. Now, I've got on the shelf behind me, I've got a whole raft of original Xbox games, which, as I say, I've been rebuying. But these are the ones on the hard drive, so I don't actually have to put a disc in. So if we go into, let's just go into A. We've got all these amps too. Look, Apex. No, it's not Apex Legends. I don't know what this is. It's a game I've never played, to be honest, but I've got it. And if you go in, let's go into Jet Set Radio Future, because that's a great game. And if you load up Jet Set Radio Future, which I'll do in a minute, it'll just load from the hard drive. So let's just do that now. And it may lose its connection as we do this, because that's what is happening to me before. So just stick with me, and it may come back on. There you go, it's come back on. So right, so now we've got the game loading up, and as I say, it's loading off the hard drive, and this has done this ever since the machine has been moddable. So you can bung your games on the hard drive, just bung them in, and there's a utility which is DVD to Xbox, I think it's called, something like that, and that's on here, and it allows you to rip the disc to the hard drive, and once you've done that, you can play it to your heart's content from the hard drive. And this is a great game. There were a lot of really good games issued on the original Xbox, and this is one of them. Let's do load game. Right, so anyway, as I was saying, there's a lot of great games on the original Xbox, and some of them now are backwards compatible on the Xbox One. Not many, though, so if you want to be able to play all the original Xbox games, you'll need an original Xbox. Even more games are backwards compatible on the 360, so you could run a lot of them on the 360, but a lot of them don't play on the 360 either. So if you want the full catalogue, as I say, you'll want an original Xbox. And, you know, do what I do, go around boot sales, keep your eyes open for original Xbox games, buy them online if you can get them cheap, or if you can get a job lot or whatever. And then just load them up to your hard drive. So let's just go into this quickly, just to show it's running. I love the cell shading on this game. It's a beautiful looking game, and it's a fantastic game to play as well. Quite hard in places. But nothing like this. We had Jet Grind Radio on the Dreamcast, I believe. I never played that one. But this is great. My mate who got me into the Xbox... yeah, my mate who got me into the Xbox got me into this game as well. So let's just go down here. Let's just do a bit of grinding, and then I'll get out of here. We jump up on here, and he should grind. There you go. He's grinding away. And bang, off he goes. Right, so that's enough of that. As you can see, this is a lovely looking game. Oh, you can spray these or whatever. I don't know. Can't remember now. It's a while since I played this. As I say, it looks lovely. Plays well. And it's coming off the hard drive. So that's that, and it's all up and running, and I can assure you all the games I've got on here run perfectly fine. So that's that, and now I'm going to go out and we'll go back in and have a look at some of the emulators. Okay, we're back, and as I say, we're going to go in now and have a look at some of the emulators. So go down to emulators, and as I say, we've got CoinOps 8 and Ninja Massive, or Premium Ninja Massive. Now, these are two different front ends, and they look different. I actually think Premium Ninja Massive looks nicer, but CoinOps is, I find CoinOps a little bit easier to use. You can actually launch Ninja from in CoinOps if you set it up that way, but I haven't. I've set it up as two separate entities. So Yeah, I kind of prefer it like that, but that would be up to you if you ever decided to do something like this. But just to show you what the Xbox can do, let's go into CoinOps. And that'll load up just like a game would. And it offers a whole raft of different options and different systems. Now, you're not going to be able to use things like Dreamcast, as I say, is just too powerful a machine for it to be able to be emulated on the Xbox. But other than that, this is pretty powerful, and there's a whole load of stuff on here that you can look at. So at the moment, I've got it sort by name and console. If you press the back button on the controller, you can change that. If you look at the top left-hand side there, if I press the back button on the controller, you'll see it change. So you've got sort by console, arcade or home, number of players, name split, name merged, sort by type split, type merged, marker split, marker merged, year of release, times played, name and console. So I've got it set to name and console. So let's stick with that at the moment. And if you see, I've got Commodore 64 up at the moment. If I hit the left and right on the thumb pad, it'll take you to the different systems. So if I go all the way along to A, we've got arcade first. So there you go. You've got arcade. At the moment, we've got arcade, and it will give you the numbers. So you've got all these games. And these will be run through MAME. So you've got arcade, there's the number ones. If I go to A, you've got arcade A. So we've got all these here, look. Afterburner 2. And then you go through, you've got B, C, and so on. So we get through from all these. And then XYZ. And then we've got Amiga, Amstrad, Atari 2600. I wonder, has it got, where are we? No, it hasn't got many Atari 2600 games. We've got Yar's Revenge. I think that's it, isn't it? No, we've got a few more. Adventure, Pac-Man, Pitfall 2, Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, and Yar's Revenge, famously. I think Yar's Revenge was written by the same guy who wrote the tie-in for E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which is famously one of the worst games ever made. But the poor guy didn't have enough time to make that game. But anyway, that's for another video. Atari ST, Atari XL, Classic, which is classic PC games, I believe. You've got Black, Doom, Doom 2, Doom GoldenEye. So that must be a port of GoldenEye to Doom, which I've never looked at. That might be worth having a look at. Final Doom and all the rest of it. Anyway, so then we've got ColecoVision, Commodore 64. Commodore 64, I had some issues trying to get that to work. And it's notoriously difficult to get up and running Commodore 64 because it's supposed to use a keyboard. So, yeah, I had some problems getting Boulder Dash to run. It ran okay. I couldn't actually get in to play it. I need to have a look into that because I've not really used it on here before because I tend to play Commodore 64 games on my mini Commodore 64 or on my PC. Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Master System, Mega CD, Mega Drive, Mega Drive 32X, MSX, Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo 64, PC Engine. It didn't seem to have SNES, which is interesting. PlayStation, how well they'll play, I couldn't tell you. I've not tried any of these. Spectrum, the old Spectrum. I wonder which Spectrum games it's got. Yeah, it's got a few. I've played Chucky Egg, you can see, and Chucky Egg 2. I wonder. Wonder if it's got. No, it hasn't. Oh, that's a shame. Maybe it's because it needs a keyboard. Hasn't got the Hobbit. That's the one I was looking for. But anyway, never mind. Super Nintendo. Oh, it has got Super Nintendo. Oh, because it's under S. X68000. And then we're back to arcade. So there's a whole load of games on here. And I don't know. I don't know. Arcade. What can we do? Let's just go into Afterburner. Right, so how do you insert coin? So I've put in some money. You can hear that. Oh, here we go. How do you go left and right on this? Oh, not controlling it yet. Here we go. Oh, yeah, here we go. Oh, and I can shoot. Where's the arrow? All right, it's working. Not very good at this, am I? Don't know what I'm doing, really. It's been a while since I played this one. Oh, I didn't realise that. I've got exosets or whatever you call them. Where are these games gone? Anyway, look, that's that. So we have to get out of that for a minute. And yeah, that works okay. And now we're back at the desktop. And that seems to be going through there okay again as well. If you look on the top right there, you've got view favorite games. So if I press the black button, it brings up the favorites that I've loaded. So you can see there's a few in here that I've loaded up. Boulder Dash, Chucky Egg, things like that that my partner likes to play. Jetpack, oh, that's a fun game. Manic Miner. Oh dear, some of these, I remember these old games. You got things like Double Dragon, which I've been playing. So yeah, that's CoinOps. So there's an awful lot in there, and yeah, it's phenomenal, great fun. But there's also Ninja Massive. So let's go and have a look at that next. So I'm going to get out of here and go into Ninja Massive. So bear with me. Right, so we're into Ninja Massive now, and as you can see, it looks, well, a lot nicer than CoinOps. I think the front end looks gorgeous, and the work that's gone into the graphics and the little videos and everything, there's an awful lot of work gone into this, and it looks phenomenal. And the way it's laid out, we've got arcade classics, we've got console classics, old school, action games, beat 'em ups, Fight Club, so fighting games, Race Driver, which would be your racing games, Run and Gun, so things like Metal Slug, that kind of thing, Shoot in 3D, Shoot 'em ups, so the shmups, a lot of people like those, sporting classics, I love all these old sporting classics, some of them are fantastic. Sporting games take themselves a bit too seriously these days, and they're full of microtransactions, so yeah, a lot of these old ones were nicer for me. I enjoyed them more. And Laserdisc games. Probably shouldn't have known about these. I've probably come across these back in the day, but I don't really remember them. And then Shutdown. Now, so if we go into Arcade Classics by pressing the A button, it'll bring you up a list of games. So here we are. 19XX, whatever that is. Some of these I won't know. 1941, 1942, 1943, 1944. As you can see, that looks interesting. Never seen that one before. All these different games in here, and as I say, the graphics and the way it's laid out is just gorgeous. I can't fault the layout. It's fantastic. You can go out of that, and then you would go along to the next one, and you've got console classics, and as you can see, console classics. All sorts of different console games from back in the day. Let's see if you can spot any that you know and love. There's an awful lot in here. I'm not going to go through all of these. But yeah, that's console classics. Then we've got old school. So yeah, you'll recognise some of these. Arkanoids. God knows what that's going to be like with a controller. I spent years playing, hours playing Breakout on the old original Atari machine. One Christmas, asteroids. I used to love asteroids. My mate was over the other day. He said he didn't like asteroids. Don't know what's wrong with him. Yeah, as you can see. So, yeah, I'm not going to sort of hang around in here too long. Some of these will be, by the looks of it, yeah, some of them are the same stuff. So it's replicated in different places. But yeah, it looks gorgeous. What we got? Fight Club. Let's have a look at the fighting games, what we got in here. Again, see if you can recognise any of these. So yeah, it's a lovely front end, and it just adds to what the original Xbox can do. So yeah, I love it. I love the original Xbox. I love what it can do. I think even now, if you can get hold of one that's got all this lot on it, or if you've got the nous to just frig around with it for a little while and get it all up and running yourself, then yeah, it's definitely worth having. And it makes for a great little device to stick under your telly and play some old retro games. And yeah, in an old retro box as well. So it's a lot of fun. But anyway, that's my little tour of the original Xbox. I don't know what you guys think. It's a lovely bit of kit, and I've got a real soft spot for the original Xbox. As I say, power, controls. It's got that hard drive. It had Xbox Live, though it hasn't got that anymore. And the modding scene is, the modding scene's terrific. And not as much going on out there now as there used to be, but it's still there. And people are still using these old devices. And yeah, I love it. Anyway, that's me done. I'm going to sign off now because I've got to get myself a quick cup of tea and then I'm off to pick my lad up. So I will speak to you guys in the next one. Bye.